Good morning,
Welcome,
everyone.
everyone. Thank you for taking time on this Saturday morning to join us here with Elif. She is the creator of AREquestions.com. She is a great resource that I've mentioned before. Some of you were here a few days ago on the PPD question, and I think that I want to continue to give Elif a platform to share her resource, and she's going to give you insight into her background and what allowed her to create this and what inspires her. And I think this is something that everyone will find very helpful. So without further ado, I'll leave it up to her to kind of give you some background. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, Jonathan. Good morning, everyone. Thanks for coming. I was just checking your names. I feel like some names are familiar. Anyhow, so like Jonathan said, after passing my exams, I created this website with the questions that I was preparing for my own studying. And like most of you guys, I have been through a long testing process, and I learned stuff as you guys do right now, and I started to formalize them to make them more like sense. And we are going to discuss today how to study and pass PPD and PDD, and I would like to share my tips with you, and I hope to answer your questions if you have any. Hopefully you do. And don't worry about pronouncing my name. It's Elif, but like I was just telling Jonathan Crystal before, I don't mind. I live in New York, and I'm just gonna give a little feedback about myself so you guys can relate to, hopefully, that to see that you can also do it, okay? And no matter what you're doing or like how crazy your life is, I hope you believe that you can do it. That's the first step with AREs. And we wanted to focus on PPD and PDD today. We were talking with Jonathan last month. I feel like these two are the hardest, that everybody struggles. I also struggled passing these two exams. It took a couple times. And so I always like to share information about these two more than the other four. Feel like these two are the hardest. So right now on my website, I have PPD, PDD, and PA questions. Recently, I started working on PJM and PCM. So I am hoping by maybe September, October, both of them are also going to be on the website. I'm originally from Turkey, came here 7 years ago, moved to New York from Istanbul. I took my undergrad and master's degrees in architecture, both of them architecture in Turkey. I've worked for New York City right now, doing mostly project management, not design. And I have a 3-year-old daughter, and I spent 2 years to pass all of the 5.0 exams. So just be careful, be mindful about that all of the following suggestions, recommendations are my personal opinion, based on my personal experience. Of course, I am observing I have observed my friends when we were studying together, and since the website, I'm in touch with a lot of people. I'm getting a lot of feedback, other opinions, and my observations. But still, if something doesn't make sense or doesn't work for you, that like the stuff that I'm going to talk about today, that's not because you don't get it. Maybe it is because it's not for you. Okay, not everything is for everyone. Okay, so just keep in mind and give yourself more credit that if something doesn't make sense to you, doesn't work for you, maybe it's just it doesn't, your brain is not wired that way. Okay, maybe you have another method that you have to discover, which you will. So even though it feels like forever to pass the 6 exams, right? Average is like, I guess, 1.5 to 2 years. Those years are not wasted, okay? In that time, your brain is actually figuring out the best method when it comes to studying, when it comes to test taking, when it comes to controlling your anxiety and all that, okay? So it is a process, and it is very cliche, but like everybody else says, it is not a It's a marathon, it's not a sprint, okay? So just keep that in mind, and please keep in mind that some of these may not work you, and that's still okay. So how to start with these 2 exams? Where to start? Even though I am now a third-party study material provider, right? I still feel like that your beginning point is the NCARB handbook, 5.0 handbook. And in that handbook, whichever exam you are taking, you have to carefully study each word, okay? And that handbook, in my opinion, is very short. It should be much more, there should be much more information, especially about these harder exams, like technical exams. But there's still a great section. I think the best part of this handbook is the reference matrix all the way at the end. So if you go to page 168 to 173, you are going to see that matrix. So that matrix is your best friend, because that matrix shows you which books you have to study per which exam. So in the beginning of my ARE journey, because of the pro practice exams not having so much books in that list, I only referred that handbook maybe once or twice. But when I get to technicals, I really organized based on that matrix. I organized which books I'm going to study first, and then second per exam. So for the technical exams, there are a couple books that keeps repeating for all 3 of them. So what I'm trying to say is I started with those, reading those first, and then walked the path through more specific books per the exam that I'm going to take the next time. So that's where you should start, and I highly suggest reading those books, actually. And I'm going to get to there. I know there's a huge argument about if you should read the books or not, or just is there a shortcut. I'm going to get there, and I'm going to just give you my opinion, my take. What about the third party? Definitely use them to support, but don't depend on them, okay? So you have to learn the content from the books, from the resources, let's say, listed by NCARB. Because NCARB is asking the questions based on these resources. And the problem is there's sometimes conflicting information between the NCARB books and the third party. And honestly, I feel the most like annoying question that I see on Facebook board is when people ask, Ballast say this, but MEEB says this. Which one is correct? I'm like, this is an obsolete question. MEEB, go with the MEEB. Ballast is not one of it's not listed in the matrix. The authority who is setting the rules and preparing the questions for this exam already has a handbook, and they are already telling you which book that you have to read. So this is a redundant question. Use the ballast, yes, but if you see a conflicting information, just cross it. Refer to the book that NCARB says you to refer to. So that's where I'm at, like standing. So and like I said, like even the entire world says otherwise, always follow the information in the books that are listed by NCARB. Sometimes they are inaccurate, sometimes they are dated, old information, not relevant anymore to the practice. It doesn't matter, don't care. Just whatever the MEEB says, mark that answer as your correct choice on the exam. Maybe your office is not using that. Nobody's using that HVAC system anymore in the entire world. I don't care. Just I am gonna follow the MEEB. That was my motto, and I think that's what everybody should do. And the rest of the discussion is just unnecessary. So why and how I did write my own questions. So when it comes to reading the books, the biggest issue is retaining the information. Even with the first 5.0 exam that I took, PJM, there was only one book, right? Architectural Handbook of Professional Practice in that matrix. And there are contract documents. and I don't remember any other book. Even one book, okay, it's a huge book, it's like 1,000-something pages, yes, but still one book. So that was good news, because when you get to technical exams, it's 10 books each having it had 1,000 pages. So one book should be easier, right? But I started reading it, and to be honest with you, like next day, I noticed that I'm just wasting it felt like I'm wasting my time, because I was not retaining any of that. I was just like, my eyes were reading, but my brain was not there. And again, being a foreigner, right? Not speaking English, like not knowing English as the main language, as a secondary language, is also makes it harder too, I believe. So I started highlighting, taking notes. I am not good at taking notes personally. Again, so this is very personal, just be careful. But some people I have seen while studying are great at taking notes. And I think their secret was writing them in their own words, not entirely copying and pasting the sentence that they thought important on their notepad, but they were rephrasing it with their own words and with their understanding. So then your brain actively gets involved in the process of thinking and analyzing the information. Not just eyes are reading, but your brain is actually, you actually like nudge your brain to just get up. You have to do some work. You have to find me explain this concept that I read on this paragraph in one sentence, right? So then next time when you are in the exam, it's much harder for your brain to find that information, because now you created a memory with that information. So we always are better at remembering memories. So that's why people use like abbreviations. What is that called in English? I forgot. Like you use the abbreviations of each letter, and then you try to memorize things like, so that's all because you are trying to create a funny memory, a bizarre memory, something that's going to make your brain to remember. So I noticed that my notes were just copy and paste, and it didn't, again, my brain was just passive, not active. My eyes were reading and my hand was copying. So, and I'm like, okay, this doesn't make sense. Highlighting is good too. So I think I was good at highlighting at some point. And then I started highlighting the first week. And then later I'm like, okay, let's turn this into questions, this information that's you highlighted. And then I am coming from a huge testing background. Since I feel like since I'm born, I'm taking a test. Turkey back then, when I was growing up, it was all about standardized tests. Your educational life, you would go through a standardized test almost every year, and all of them were very important and all that. So it's very stressful and very unhealthy process for a kid to go through, but they made us to go through. I'm kind of glad, kind of angry with them, but I remember having a textbook, like test book, and solving quizzes when I was like 6-7 years old. So that creates its own industry. So whatever exam you are going to take in Turkey, there are like 10,000s of questions out there already. Like somebody wrote a book with like 2,000 questions, and 5 other people followed him. So it is an industry, so people are trying to make money, so it makes sense, right? But in the US, it's much different. This is not a testing country. This is a different education system, which I wasn't aware of. So I Googled, and I'm like, okay, combined, there is maybe like 500 questions about these exams out there. Even I buy all the third-party materials. This is nothing. Like 500 questions is nothing. I was taking 500 questions a day when I was in high school. Like, this doesn't make sense. Why is nobody creating more questions? I was angry, I remember. So I started, okay, whatever, write your own questions. So that's how it started. I joined a online website that you can write own questions, and every day before going to bed, I was solving whatever questions that I wrote that day, 5, 3, 10, whatever. So that is another key point about retaining the information. Whatever you highlighted, whatever you turn into a flashcard, whatever you turn into a note, you have to repeat. Okay, you cannot go to bed that day after you've filled a notepad, like a sheet of studying. You cannot just close and go to bed. Okay, you have to go back, start reading all of your notes again, try to try to pull and call those memories back, okay? So that's how you learn and retain. Don't just read. It sounds exhausting, but it is actually not. The other way is more, it's just wasteful. You just sit there 20 hours a week and just your eyes are reading, and after 4 weeks you're like, oh man, I don't remember anything. That is a huge anxiety. But in the meantime, when you are slowly working, yes, it is, you get anxious too. You're like, oh, maybe I'm losing so much time, but don't worry, you are not. Okay, just keep sticking to your program and take your time. So I think there are other good ways of retaining information. I forgot to mention one of them, studying with a group of people. I later discovered the importance of this. Before, during my pro practice exams, I was not aware of this availability. And when I joined the boot camp for passing PPD and PDD, so the first 4 exams I just passed on my own the first try. So I was a little naive about the whole thing. And then I hit the wall with PPD, the first technical. I mean, PA is kind of technical too, but it is in between. So PPD, I hit the wall and I didn't know what to do. And then I took PDD later and then failed again. So I joined boot camp, and then I saw the power of studying with other people. Oh my God. I'm like, I was thinking, oh my God, why didn't I figure this out before? There are a lot of social platforms that you can connect to people, right? Connect with them and ask them, would you like to start studying together? I'm going to get back to this specifically, how you can utilize this, okay? When you are reading books. Later, I'm going to touch base then, and I'm going to give like specifics about how you can set a group of people and how you can start studying with them. Some typical general, although I mentioned some of them already, I'm going to say a couple of them that I did not mention. So perseverance is, as usual, like everything else in life, is the key. You have to stick to it. You have to tell yourself that this is a marathon, this is a long run. There are going to be hiccups, there are going to be some bumps. I'm going to fail, or maybe I'm not going to fail, but I don't care. I am down for this. I'm going to do this. You started this path, okay? When you start this path, it's a mental preparation. You're like, I can do this. It may take some time. It doesn't matter. I am doing something important for my life. That's why you should not listen to negative people around you. Like your coworkers maybe are not testing, and maybe some of them think it is stupid that you are wasting all this money, time, life on these exams. Who cares if you have the license or not? I respect that. Don't get me wrong. Not everybody has to follow the path that you and I did, right? Everybody has their own opinion, and maybe they don't. But I had a motivation to start testing, and obviously looks like since you joined in a Saturday morning, you have a motivation to pass these exams. Stick to your motivation, stick to your starting point. Don't listen to people. Your family and your friends are very important in this process. I actually stopped seeing 2 of my friends. They were a couple, and every time I see them, and every time I started to like talk about how hard it is to pass my exams or studying, or every time they called us and invited us to a party or something and we rejected because I had to study, they were like, oh, why are you studying? Just stop it. It's like so stupid. Why do you do this? You guys are so boring. My husband was also going through his licensing. He's a physical therapist. So they were always kind of like pulling us down, you know, like, and every time they challenge you, oh, why are you testing? Even though you tell them something else, your brain also starts to challenge your own motivation. And I'm like, okay, I should stop seeing these people because they don't understand what I'm going through. They don't have to, but I also don't have to challenge my initial motivation every time they tell me something, which you do. And then, so just tell your friends and tell your parents or family or significant other, that your kids, that this is a process, you are committed, they have to support you. They have to either support you or they have to keep their opinion to themselves. Okay, there's no other way. So they cannot keep telling you that, oh, this is stupid, why are you doing this? It doesn't there's no point for them. You don't need that. And during the exam, I have a couple tips during the exam. One of them is, I believe, it's my favorite, so I'm gonna leave it to last. So do not spend, for each exam, you know how many questions you have and how much time you have, right? So my strategy was, for case study questions, I believe right now you only get 10 or 12 case study questions, right? I would always leave maximum 4 minutes per case study question. So then I would divide whatever time, the minutes, how many minutes I have, to the number of questions left. So approximately it would come down to 1.6 minutes, I believe so. That's what I remember. And in every 10 questions, I would check my time. If I spend more than 16 minutes for the first 10 questions, I would start to speed up for the other 10. If I spend less than 16, I would be like, okay, you're in good shape. Don't calm down, and you have a little bit more time for the next 10. So I will try to balance out, because some of the questions, even the regular questions, not just case study, takes more time than the others. So if there's a short question, okay, and let's say you got a question, very short. This is very PDD, by the way. Very short, a sentence, and only words, just 5 options, just one single word in option, and you have to pick one, right? And obviously that is a knowledge-based question that you have to absolutely know, because it's asking, what is this? And you have to say, what color is this? You have to say yellow, blue, red. There's no guessing, right? Guesstimating. So if you don't know the information, the question was short, you already spent like 10 seconds to read it. You're like, oh man, I absolutely have zero idea. Click something and pass. Don't spend more than 15 seconds. Rereading the question, rereading those options, it doesn't make sense. Some people just, I do live quiz taking sessions a lot with people, and then they just read the question. It's just one sentence, and like I said, very short. And then they just pause, and I look at my watch. It's like already 30 seconds. And then they go, I don't know the answer. And it's 45 seconds. And I'm like, were you thinking to remember? They're like, no, I had no idea. I was just looking like, and with empty eyes to the screen. Why, right? You never heard that word before in your entire life, career. Just pass. Do not leave any question unanswered. That's very silly, because sometimes you get the case studies and you run out of time and the exam shuts itself off. Those questions you left unanswered. Click something, mark them. If you have time, you can come back. But if you don't, once a girl in my group said she lost 15 questions on PA, because PA took a lot of time and the case studies took a lot of time, and she left those unanswered. She marked them. She was going to come back, but she ran out of time, and 15 questions. So think about it. If you click something, 4 options, right? If you click one thing, your chances are getting that correct is 25%. That is a huge number. Why are you wasting that chance? You buy lottery tickets, 1 in a million chance. You pay your $5 on that. Why don't you take 25% chance, right? Take the chance. Just click something, go. You can come back later. It doesn't matter. Okay, so last of them that I feel like last 2 are equally important. Okay, let's start with the first one, during the exam. Especially in PPD, questions tend to be longer. Okay, they give you more like a scenario, and then the options are also usually a full sentence, and sometimes 2 sentences in options, which is crazy. But there's a paragraph of scenario and a sentence question, and then there's like long sentence for each of the options, and it says select 2, right? You are given 5 and you are asked to select 2. Those are I feel like people are scared those questions a lot, but let me share a tip with you. This is just from a pure test taking point. This has nothing to do with ARIES, but this is just a standardized test taking method. If you have no idea, or if you have some idea but you are not sure, you can use this trick. Look at the question for the important words. highlight them. Some of them are just, some of the sentences or some couple of the words in that scenario is actually doesn't need to be there, but it's just they wanted to make the question wordy and confuse you, so they gave you all that information. Most of the information are relevant though, like 10% of the information irrelevant. So try to find what is really relevant. How can you detect that? Like look for the words it says like important, most, best, the, okay? So if there's like, there are indications in the question itself that some stuff is more important than others. So you have to fish for that in the options. Now go to the options, read the options carefully. You are going to see some of those words, okay, are repeating in the option 2 with a synonymous word. Not the exactly same word, but another word that kind of the same meaning, okay? Not it has to be entirely same meaning, but kind of is good enough. So if you see that in the question, the word is repeating in the option 2, you are also going to notice that the correct 2 options are also kind of sounding similar, and then the other 3 are either sounding, all 3 sound similar, or they're all crazy. Okay, they're like, they have nothing to do with the question. Like one of them maybe has something to do, but the other 2 is absolutely. So usually we are good at eliminating the option that is like crazy, unrelated. Like, so we usually are left with, we pick also 1 because that's like, and then we are like, okay, which one is the second correct option? Use this tactic when you are like not sure. Look at the question again, fish for those words, those clues, and look at the options. Whichever option has a similar word to the question, like similar meaning, okay? Not the exact word, but like similar meaning. You will see what I mean. Just try to practice this at home. With my questions, actually, you can, I feel that's how my brain works, I guess. That's why I kind of focused on that. Now I go and look back my questions with other people, we read out loud. I'm like, you know what? It's very obvious that I keep repeating like the same meaning in the question and the correct option. If you look that way with my questions, it's very obvious. And with NCARB questions, very obvious too. With most of the standardized tests, it's very obvious. My husband always teases whenever somebody shows us a standardized test for, let's say, mechanical engineers, and he's a physical therapist, right? We had a friend who was testing for, he told him, like, give me the questions. I'm sure I can answer 25, 30% of them correctly, just using this method. You don't have to know the content. You actually really have to be good at taking the test. And you are probably gonna get like he said, he's always scoring like 20, 25% correct in my questions too. He has nothing to do with architecture. So that's why, that's a good tip. The other thing is you have to, I highly suggest people to do before the exams. So last 2 weeks or 3 weeks to your exam, I highly suggest everyone to take a ridiculous number of questions every day, okay? Start from 200 questions a day and build your way up to 500, 600. And always try to give yourself 3 to 4 hours, like the exam. I guess it's now 3 hours. So give yourself 3 hours, start with 200 questions, go fast. And then don't move, don't take a bathroom break, don't check your phone, shut down everything like the exact exam atmosphere or environment. Don't eat, don't drink, and don't have a pen and paper. Open a paint screen if you wish. And then just you're gonna see, you are gonna build your way up starting from 200s to 500s in 2 to 3 weeks. Every day you have to do this. It sounds a little insane, I know, but I met a lot of people doing this and it works, I promise. And you are going to get much faster. Why are we doing this? We are doing this it's like athletes, right? Imagine this, like you are running with like heavy weights taped around your ankle, and then on the day of the actual race, you're just removing the heavy weight and you run much faster, right? So on the exam, you need that speed. So that's why you are doing this. Okay, let's start talking about PPD. So in my mind, the technical exams are similar to project phases. So this is an analogy that I created for myself to understand, and sorry, I mean, not created, developed throughout a 1-year period, okay? Starting from P8 and PPD and PDD. So you guys are probably familiar. Everybody suggests taking the pro practice exam first and then the technical, which I agree. And then everybody says start with PA and then PPD and PDD, right? That's a very common suggestion on everywhere. So I agree with that too. Why? Because you are very familiar with architectural project phases and process, right? From school, from work, everybody is kind of, I believe, familiar. So how it starts, you start from larger scale. So you first analyze and understand the site, the climate, the zoning code, the building code. So the things are your client's building program, the function, the uses, and everything. So all this large scale information is dumped in your brain at the start of your project, right? It is a little crazy because there are so many things that you have to control, and this machine, the building that you are going to create, has to work perfectly with all of them, like considering all of them. You cannot have a code violation. You cannot have, if your client wanted 3 bedrooms, you cannot give them 2 bedrooms. If your client wanted to face their living room to south to the view, you have to keep that in mind too. So everything. If there's a local code that is banishing you to paint the house blue, you cannot paint it blue. So all this stuff that is being dumped, you are doing a huge research, right? So things are very large scale. So even though it looks a little scary, your brain starts to analyze and process it in time. You usually spend 2 to 4 weeks to this process, right? So that's why that's your PA exam. That's where you start. So the content is much larger. But you are also in the programming phase. You kind of start to also programming to schematic design. You start to actually design the building, right? You are trying to decide a structural system that's not going to violate any of the considerations that you had in the beginning of the project. You are thinking an HVAC system. You are thinking a paving material for the road, maybe. So all of this you are starting to like consider, and your design, like architectural design criteria, all of that. So now you are in the realm of schematic design to design documentation, right? So things are getting a little bit more specific, not so large anymore, trying to get like smaller scale. So that's PPD. But again, the hardship of PPD, which in my opinion, the hardest of all the 6 exams, it's the content is so broad. You have all the information that is being brought from the programming phase. Now you're in the schematic, so you have to pull the correct information to bring this machine together that's working. Because in the next phase, you are just going to deal with the details. I mean, sometimes it's not that linear. We sometimes go back, change the decisions, client make a change, blah, blah. You all know that. But for the sake of the exam, try to think a little bit more linear, okay? Not like your actual experience. That's actually, as a side note, is the biggest compromise or biggest default of the standardized tests, because they create a linear process and the life is not linear, right? So again, come back to PPD. So because the content is too broad and they can ask anything and everything, because think about it, when you start the project, sky is the limit, right? Options are limitless. You can do whatever you want. I mean, most of the time. So in the exam, it is like that. So you have to know about concrete structures. You have to know about wood. You have to know about, I don't know, steel. You have to know about all sorts of HVAC, everything. And what happens is it is a little overwhelming. So I'm going to talk about which books I feel like does the best job in the shortest time, hopefully, for PPD. But I think that's the issue with PPD. So I know there's a huge, like very popular advice that's going on. And I followed myself personally in the beginning too, that people say study this PPD and PDD together and take them like weeks or sometimes days apart. I disagree, but again, this is my personal opinion. And why I disagree is because of this phasing thing that I just explained. When you start from the larger scale of content and understand it, and then you zoom it a little bit, and then zoom it even the like smaller scale and PDD, your brain processes this information and can kind of link back that the smaller detail that you've seen on the PDD question back to the information in PPD. Okay, so you can make that connection. But my problem is not studying them together. My problem is taking them close apart. I think what happens is it's harder for your brain to shift the gears between these two scales. Okay, so it's not that easy to change it in 2 days. What I would do if I go back, to be honest with you, first of all, I would give myself time to finish all the books that I want to read, and people tell me that I have to read, right? For PPD, in my opinion, a good 8 to 10 weeks of reading just for PPD reading is necessary. And then I would combine, I would maybe just, after that 8 to 10 weeks, I would also peak some of the PDD material and maybe do 2 weeks of PDD, which brought me 10 to 12 weeks, right? And then I would give myself 2 weeks of just practicing questions, maybe 2-3 weeks, and then take my exam. So I know it sounds crazy long, like 14 to 16 weeks maybe, but I would do that. Why? Because why am I rushing? When you rush yourself, you are stressing yourself. First time I passed PA only studying 8 weeks total, like 6 weeks, 8 weeks of reading, and then maybe 2 weeks of question taking, and then 10 weeks I passed PA. When I get to PPD and PDD, I did this huge mistake. And I started studying them together, and I was panicking because I scheduled my exams absolutely 10 weeks after that. And then I was panicking. I'm like, oh my God, there's so much information. I was overwhelmed. And what am I going to do? How am I going to finish all this? So jumping from one PPD resource to PDD and then coming back to PPD and then PDD. So I panicked. And there was absolutely no need for me panicking because I already had like 4.5 years in my clock. And I don't know. It was just, I don't know, you make mistakes. It was me making a huge mistake. So why I'm saying it's a huge mistake, I don't mind failing. At this point, I know that's a part of the deal. But when you fail, depending on your personality, sometimes you take it very hard and you really pull yourself down, your self-esteem goes down, and you lose like 2 months to bring yourself back up after that fail, or 1 month. You could use that 2 months for studying more, right? And then go past. That's why I felt like personally for me, it was a silly mistake because I did not take the fail cool the first time. So I lost a lot of time. I took the first time PPD and PDD in February. From February, it took me come back to May, so the restarting again. And then I took PDD again in June, July, sorry, mid-July, May to July, I studied again. Again, I studied them together. Again, a huge mistake. And then July, I took PDD again and failed. I went there to take PPD2 actually again next week, I guess. The test center crashed, so I couldn't take PPD second time. And then I came home from the test center. They did not let me take the exam, and I'm like, I think I'm making a mistake. I should just take it, like just walk back, take a pause, and then look what I'm doing and reassess what I'm doing. And then I noticed that, oh, I should compartmentalize this, right? Take each exam at a time, give myself time. And then I passed them PPD in October, same year, and PDD in December. So see, October to December, I had like 6 weeks, I guess, 6 to 8 weeks, yeah. So it's not impossible to pass PPD, but it is, I mean, it's not easy, but it's not impossible, okay? You just have to do the work. in my opinion, there's no shortcuts. I spent a year. If there was a shortcut, I think I would find it. I spent a year to pass these 2 exams. So I have been talking to a lot of people who are, sometimes people call me and I mean, they send me their phone number and can we talk? And even though they took these exams 3-4 times, they couldn't pass. And they say, but they confess, they are like, I have been trying to take the shortcut. And I'm like, I know, I did that same thing. It doesn't work. Unfortunately, you have to come to that realization that I came when I failed the second time PDD, that, you know what, this is not going to happen like this. I have to actually sit down and do the work. And when you get to that realization, and this is going to take time, and don't freak out if you fail again next time. So you have to get there, and you will get there. It is a process. You're a human being, so it takes time. Don't worry. And let's talk about the books. So this is my PPD trio. Okay, I feel like this is a table with 3 legs. Okay, and it's the best structure, you know, because it's a triangle. So mechanical electrical equipment for buildings, MEEP, is, I believe, is a must. Don't scream. I know it's a very long book, but I have a tip for you. So the second important book is Heating, Cooling, Lighting, in my opinion, and must. So I would say start with Heating, Cooling, Lighting, okay? And then when you go to the MEEP 12th edition after Heating, Cooling, Lighting, but really, Heating, Cooling, Lighting, like read it as your Bible. Every sentence, every word in that book is important. And just carefully study that book. Take notes, make flashcards, write it down, draw sketches, whatever works for you, okay? When you come back to MEEP, you're going to see that first 11 chapters of MEEP is talking almost exactly same things that Heating, Cooling, Lighting does. So you can just do a little like review of the first 11 chapters. And you are going to see it's repeating the information, and you can just double check yourself if you remember or not. Look at the content. What I reviewed, guys, I would always go to the content of the book in the beginning, the content section, and I would look at the titles of each chapter and each like sub sections. And if I felt like, oh, you know what, I read this subtitle in Heating, Cooling, Lighting too, but let's review again. I don't think Heating, Cooling, Lighting had enough information. I remember seeing something on the exam about this content, but the Heating, Cooling, Lighting did not answer my question. Let's see if MEEP is going to do that. Most likely it will. And then the first 11 chapters, you can just give a week, okay, and then start from the 12th and go on. So 12th, I think, is one of the most important chapters in MEEP because it's talking about all the mechanical systems. There's the electrical chapter, I think 16, if I'm not wrong. And then there's one all the way at the end about elevators. There's one about wastewater. I did not study that chapter, I'm going to be honest with you. But this is what I did with MEEP. I paid really attention to graphics, diagrams, images on the book. Under the images, there's always like a little explanation for the figure or the drawing. I studied them carefully. They're very important. Try to like really take a image scan of those images, and you'll try to like record it in your brain, like really study, create a memory. Like I said, like tell it to a friend, show it to your boyfriend at home. I don't know. So try to really understand. And MEEP has some questions scattered through the book, and some of them are, I guess most of them are like math questions. I feel like, yeah. So try to solve them and change the numbers and redo them, and change the scenario a little bit and redo the math again. So you're going to see how it is relevant to the exam, to the actual exam. So once you are really I would say spend like I said, like 4 to 6 weeks to these 2 books. And then take all of your notes and review them daily, right? And then your third thing that you have to really carefully understand is building code. So what I did was, eventually I figured this method and it worked, because I was only using very few chapters and sections of code at my office. Just means of egress, and because we were doing mostly interior renovations, I was not doing like ground up buildings. I would never use, I would only use occupancy types, and then 10, yeah, chapter 10, I guess. Not chapter 5, not chapter 6. Sometimes chapter 9, yeah, because of the sprinklers and stuff. I remember that too. But see where I'm coming from, my code experience was very limited. So what it does on my first PPD exam is I saw a lot of code questions, especially when in case studies. And I freaked out, I panicked. I didn't know where to go, where to look, what to do. I lost a lot of time, and it just, I just messed up. And then second time taking the exam, I decided that you have to learn the code. There's no shortcut. You have to. So I opened the building code illustrated and the actual code itself. So 2 screens, and then one screen I had the building, a building code illustrated. So I was reading the code, the illustrated book, and then I was looking the actual, that code section that the book says, and the actual code, and trying to read them. There is a commentary that you pay, I guess 10 or 20 bucks a month, like subscription. If you go International Building Code website, there's a commentary that you can, I only paid for a month, and I believe it was $20, not expensive. I only paid a month and immediately canceled after that. And the commentary helped me a lot, because after each section of the code, there was like a commentary that is explaining a little further. So you can use that too if you're like me, not good at code. But if you're not, if you're kind of okay, don't spend the money. But you have to be fast during the exam. You have to know where to look. You have to know, I memorized occupancy types. I'm not gonna lie, I don't like memorizing, and I am not good at it, but I memorized it. So there are a few things that I would suggest to memorize for PPD. I guess other than occupancy types, almost nothing. For PDD, I'm gonna tell you guys more stuff. And I think I benefited a lot because in the question, you are given a scenario. First, you have to go to chapter 3 to check the occupancy type, and then come to the whatever chapter that is questions sending you. So there's that 20 seconds that you are going to lose, or 30 seconds you are going to lose on that occupancy chapter. So to save that time, I wrote down all the like common building types and their occupancy types, and I memorized it. And I usually do my short-term memorization exercise the day before the exam. So I memorized it during my studies, but then the day before the exam, I just sit down. I don't take practice questions. I don't read books, but whatever I wrote down, like usually a single page that you have to memorize this before the exam, I usually read that page over and over and over and over. I usually give it to my husband, and he would ask me. So that's the day before exam. But you have, I would suggest, you don't have to, but I would really suggest. So there are other books that I think very important, and one of them is Architectural Acoustics. I'm going to mention something else about acoustics, so either or is good. Simplified Engineering is a good book for the structures. I only recommend part 1, okay? And there's another one called Structural Design, and chapter 1 and 2. I would recommend studying this too for structures, okay? And for acoustics. So MEEB and Heating, Cooling, Lighting is going to cover all the environmental stuff. MEEB is going to cover all the MEP and elevators, hopefully. And then you have to cover also acoustics and structures, right? There's not going to be too many structure math questions on PPD, maybe one. But there are going to be other math questions. So if you are not good at math, you have to also work on that skill and try to, I think the best thing you can do is like change the questions, the numbers in the questions, and just resolve it. So there's a great free resource, NCARB Monographs. If you guys are not aware, go to your NCARB page, personal page, home page. There's a section called Continuum Education. Click on that, and you are going to see Digital Monographs. So I studied these, so I highly suggest it. This is Architectural Acoustics Illustrated by Michael Ehrman, the owner of the Ember book. So if you study this, you don't need to read this book. They're very similar information. But I would highly suggest reviewing all this. So did I read the whole thing? No. It's like each one of them is 300-400 pages. I did not have that much time. I mean, what I did was, there's a quiz at the end. I went to the quiz directly, and I looked at the quiz questions, and I came into the PDF and tried to find the answer of that question. So there's no control find, unfortunately, anymore. Before they had that. So you have to read through a little bit to find that information. So that makes you read actually almost the whole thing. So that was good. I suggest the same method for you guys too, and then mark something on the quiz and see if you get it or not get it, and then come back and try to find the correct answer. And practice. So the last, like I said, during my book reading, I was doing 10 to 15 quiz questions every day. Okay, don't get me wrong. I did not do it right at the end. I did through the study. So what I did, I was doing my own questions. Obviously, I was doing ARE 4.0 handbook questions for these sections, 3.1 these sections, designer hacks. I did it. I did Ballast 4.0, Kaplan 4.0, Ballast 5.0, PPI. I guess I only subscribed for a month, and I also did PA questions for PPD, because I feel like they share a lot more than they share with PDD. It shares with PDD, okay? And Mechanical MEP has an online free quiz option. Google it, you will find it. I would do that too. And now talk about PDD. So very similar to the phasing analogy that I did. I guess you guys understand, so I can skip that. So now we are in a smaller scale. We zoomed in. We know our decisions. We know our building is going to have a VAV. We know it's a concrete structure, and we know it is going to have 2 passenger elevators, all that. Now we are in PDD, and we are trying to see if those systems are compatible. Are they working fine with each other? If the machine needs a little tweaking when it touches, the system touches each other, right? So I'm going to be honest with you. I think even though I took PDD 3 times and PPD 2 times, I feel even the first time I took PDD, I felt that this exam is not hard. It is only testing knowledge. PPD and PA, there's room to guesstimating, which can make it easier if you're a good test taker, can make it harder if you are not. But for PDD, if you're not a good test taker, it doesn't matter. You just have to be a nerd and study the whole thing. That's what matters. So if you study and you really learn the content, eventually you are going to pass PDD. We go these exams with a little bit of, like, not a little bit, actually, a lot of preconception, right? We imagine they're going to be hard. People are taking them 4 times, 5 times, 6 times. How am I going to pass? So we freak out each other before this. There's a stigma, unfortunately. If you are calm enough to remove the stigma and study and go to PDD, I promise you're going to pass the first time. Like, it's not that hard. It's just a lot of information that you need to really learn. And some of them is based memorization. If you click on this, guys, on the handout, you will see, mine is not clicking, but I can email Crystal or Jonathan, they can send it to you. I have a list of things that for myself, I prepared when I was studying to memorize. I can share that with you guys. And I would just pay attention to that. Unfortunately, there's a little bit of memorization required for this exam. And like I said, I also still suggest the test taking order. If you took these exams a couple of times, maybe you don't need to follow the order anymore, okay? Because you have been there, you have studied it. So you can just mix up the order a little bit. But if you are just studying, I would still suggest PA, PPD, and PDD order. So the books for PDD, on top of what you have studied and learned in PA and PPD, actually now there are not too many books, and it's not going to be too much reading. Architectural graph, there's one book that I would really suggest reading cover to cover, which is called Building Construction Principles, Materials, and Systems. This is the only book that is not listed by NCARB. Somebody told me that they read this book in college, and after she took PDD, she said, you know what, I think, and because she just graduated from college and she failed PDD, and she remembered after the exam that, oh, those questions seemed like the information was in that book. So she was in the Young Architect Bootcamp with me, and we studied, and then she studied by herself and passed, and she told us, she's like, guys, you should read this book. So it was 5 of us. We read this book together, and we all passed. And there were some of us were taking 4th or 5th time. Everybody passed. And more importantly, 2 of us was taking the 1st time, and they passed too. So it was my 3rd time. 2 guys were brand new, and then the other 2 either 3rd or 4th time. I don't want to lie. So different people, right? Different backgrounds, different genders, different family structures, everything. All of us passed. So I think you can do it too. I would highly, highly, highly suggest. You will see, if you have taken PDD before and start reading this book, you're going to be like, oh, I remember this. We were going to have that oh moment a lot. And then architectural acoustics is kind of important for PDD because it has a lot of graphics in there. I would just go and read the graphics and the sections related to that graphics maybe. So what is important with PDD is, I'm going to say the same thing for architectural graphic standards too. You cannot read the whole book, but you can definitely review all the diagrams, detailed drawings, and tables. Tables in architectural graphic standards saved my life. What those tables explain. So there's a there are like multiple tables in that book that is comparing different systems to one another when it comes to different requirements, their acoustical performance, their moisture performance, their structural performance, their, you name it. So in PDD exam, you're going to see a lot of questions that are asking you to compare things to one another, relatively know which one is better than the other one when it comes to which material is better than the other one when it comes to its acoustical performance, okay? Which detail is better than the other one when it comes to its thermal prevention performance, moisture control performance, fire rating, whatever. Like, so you are going to see that they're not asking you to absolute R value of a material, but they are giving you 3 materials and they are saying which one has the best R value and which one has the worst R value, right? So all that relative comparison can be learned from architectural graphic standards and architectural acoustics books. If you go architectural acoustics, you are going to see there's a floor section. It says fair, and then there's another one. It says good, and it says best, and it says the best. Okay, so it is like starts from fair, goes to best. So you are going to see you have to study all that. So what I was doing is I was actually sketching all that details on my notebook. Just, I mean, awful sketches, but who cares? I was just trying to like redraw and redraw. Sometimes I was putting sketch paper on architecture graphic standards and like really copying. It seems like it's silly, but actually when you start to think, when you start to draw, you start to make more sense of it. Again, your brain gets triggered and wakes up and starts actively joining the process. And there's another book that people ask me a lot if I read, because sometimes out of Olin's book, sometimes most of the time out of desperation of taking these exams multiple times, people come back and email me and say, what do you think about this book? Because I read everything else and it didn't do the trick. And I used Olin's too. I did not read the whole thing. How I used it was, again, I was looking at the content section and the titles. And whenever I felt there's a content that I don't feel comfortable enough, or I have little information, but I have seen on the exam and they ask me a lot, I would go and fill the gaps with Olin. Olin is like MEEP, very detailed and very long. I know a couple guys who read the whole thing and passed at their first tries too. So if you have time and if you can do it, go for it. But if you cannot, I would still suggest reviewing it thoroughly. Okay, it's a really good book. So again, the similar practice questions for PDD. And now I can answer your questions. Thanks for listening. I guess that's all I can say. I hope I did not forget anything. But yeah, so these are all of my suggestions. So are you guys gonna talk? Oh, Jonathan, okay. Are you guys, are attendees can unmute or they can only chat?
I believe we can give them, open the mics for them. Before we do that, so I want to thank you once again for taking the time and walking us through this. I think that there were some great additional kind of, really specific information. I think all the information was great, but I just want to point out to a few people here some of the kernels of even great information in there, gold nuggets, if you will. There's that me book that's to make sure to look at the graphics and the images. Okay, at the very least, that is very important. Elif mentioned that even if the book is big and you may not have a lot of time to really get into the weeds, get familiar with the graphics in that book. She also mentioned the heating and cooling lighting book, saying that is also a must for you to look at. So I want to kind of echo that that comment. The other big one here that I was looking at that you mentioned that I didn't even know it existed, which was the NCARB monographs that are a free resource. I was, as you were speaking, I was like, oh, let me check that out because I never came across that. And even now, even after I passed the tests, I went ahead and made sure that I have that in my list of to-dos and to review, just because I think it's a great resource. And once again, graphics and sort of diagrams are going to be very, very helpful in there. Like I said, I was just looking at a few of those graphics, and I had flashback to the tests because I was like, this looks very familiar to some of the questions that I had to kind of recall and say what certain elements are from certain systems. So I want to echo that monograph as well. And then something that you mentioned about study time with the 3 or 4 hours and things like that. I am one of the few people that did not have that time frame, right? And for some of you that are out there that may seem kind of way too much and almost impossible, I think that the more important thing is that it's the commitment that you must have, right? Whether that's the 3 or 4 hours for you or an hour of your time, of your day. The idea is the persistence, the constant study, regardless of whether it's 10 minutes, 3 hours, half a day, whatever it is. The important thing is that level of commitment that you must do it.
And you can always build your way up. It's like a muscle. You have to exercise and it's going to get better. So you can start with 1 hour or 30 minutes and you can build your way up to 2 hours on weekdays and maybe 4 hours on weekends or 5 hours. And it's going to bring your average to what I was doing 8 to 11, basically 8 p.m. to 11 usually. That was my regular hour. And then over the weekends, I was doing usually like 10, 11 to maybe 4, 5 p.m. So there's like 3, 4 hours, 5 hours sometimes that. And then I was leaving the nights for myself, maybe just watch something, over the weekends, maybe one day. But I'm going to be honest with you guys, like probably for 2 years, I did not join a lot of parties. I skipped. I did not see, this is going to be funny. I did not see a movie, like I didn't go to a theater for probably just once in the last 4 years, because of first I was pregnant, the 9 months, and doctor told me the movie sometimes hurts the baby, so that I couldn't go. Then the baby born, and I started taking the exams, and I couldn't go. Then finally I passed the exams, and 1 month after that, COVID happened, so everything shut down. So the last 4 years, I only been to a movie once. So, and I did not eat outside for 2 years, I swear. Like I did not join, and none of the friends was able to, like we were not able to join with between the kid and the work and the studying. We had no time left. It is, but you learn it, okay? Don't start right away. You just start small and it goes, like that's why everybody calls it's a process, right? It doesn't happen in one day.
And we have a question here from Ahan. He's asking the best way to study 2 weeks before the exam. I believe you mentioned that it's practice questions, right? Within your presentation, you said lots of practice questions.
You mean closer to the exam? Yes. I feel like the best way is just doing the questions, because when you read more and you are trying to learn more, you kind of start to confuse and panic, you know? So maybe stop the reading 2 weeks, the last 2 weeks. Don't read too much. Only read it when it is like absolutely necessary. And like, oh, you know what? I never heard this. I have to check. So maybe that.
Okay. Are you able to see the questions there coming up in the questions tab?
I see. Somebody says, I'm a big believer in the huge overlap between all 3 exams. If you had 2 weeks left, what is your last stop go-to approach? I think, yeah, I absolutely agree with you. There is an overlap even between the 6 exams, right? So there is an overlap, but I feel like compartmentalizing is working more for more people. But there are always people who study them all together and take them like a week apart and they pass, right? There are all possibilities. But I think the last days I would do lots of questions. Somebody says one of my biggest struggle on my last exam was the whiteboard. Yeah, it is very glitchy and my brain works better with pencil and paper. What is the advice? Okay, I did not take this exam, right? I never seen the whiteboard. I mean, I have seen it on the draft exam that NCAR provided, but I never used it. I think it's a challenge, definitely. It's not easy. It's a challenge for a lot of people. What I would do is, it was Ayhan. Ayhan. So what I would do is, Ayhan, I would definitely practice before at home using the either NCAR quiz that I'm sorry, what is that called? Demo exam, or like simple paint on Windows, or if you're using Mac, I forgot what the name was for that, but just a screen and you start. Like everything else in life, it is about repeating and practicing. So let's say you need more time than I do, right? Practicing on that. Don't listen to others. If your friend only practiced a day on that whiteboard and she was fine, it doesn't matter. If you need 3 weeks on practicing on that, take your 3 weeks. Don't rush yourself, okay? Unless your clock is, you're running out of time, don't rush. Just take your time and practice. I'm sorry about that. I'm not underestimating or undermining the hardship of that whiteboard, don't get me wrong. But since you are invested and you have reached thus far, what are you going to do, right? You have to find a method, and the best method that I know is just keep practicing, creating the similar environment at home and becoming familiar.
And on that whiteboard, my last test was I needed to use the whiteboard.
Oh.
So I did not rely on it too much. Like I didn't need it as much, but let me rephrase that. I thought I was going to be missing the paper and pencil. And I was one of those that had a big objection to it, just because to kind of go to the matter of it doesn't hurt anybody, right?
I think what they should do is they should still keep if you go to test center, you should still have the right to have the pen and paper. And if you are testing at home, but then they said that is gonna be like unfair to people who have to test home, right? Because if you have a undermining like a health condition that you can absolutely not be out, then you are kind of being singled out that way. I think at home still they could control a pen and paper, like you can show it to the proctor and like you're not sitting getting up anything, like why? I don't know, but it is what it is.
Yeah.
That's an important part, guys, that I wasted. No, I'm not gonna spend. I wasted a lot of time fighting with NCARB in my brain. Like I was constantly having an argument with NCARB in my brain, and I was getting pissed and angry. I was right to be angry with them. They're not the best. I don't want to gossip about them a lot. They have a lot of mistakes. But then I came to this realization that negativity was not helping me. me constantly having a fight with an imaginary body in my brain was taking a lot of space and energy. So I'm like, I came to that realization that it is what it is. You have to power this through and just ignore NCARB until you pass your exams. Now that I passed, I'm trying my best to be vocal about their wrongdoings, but you can do the same when you pass and become an AIA member and all that. But like for the time being, since you're testing, limit your enemies, like reduce down the list of enemies and focus on studying. Okay?
Correct, and you know, that's just what I did, and I used the whiteboard. I did miss my, you know, my pencil and paper, but they are attempting to limit the reliance or the need to sketch. But some people are just going to need to do it somehow, and
I
so
think I was also personally not using pen and paper that much during my exams. I was using them only for maybe math questions, like, and case studies. I was using them heavily on case studies, not the other questions, not the multiple choice. It is a bummer, yeah, unfortunately.
something I do want to mention for those using the whiteboard, even if you're using it for math, kind of just writing down your numbers or anything else that you're typing within the text box, make sure you exit the text box before you create a new sheet or anything else, because I ran into an issue where I wasn't exiting from the text box, and then when I came back, the information was completely gone. So hopefully, I mean, luckily, I had already answered the question, and I didn't have to run through the numbers again. But I just want to make sure that you guys know that make sure you exit that text box before you switch or you create a new sheet within the whiteboard. Otherwise, your information may be gone.
And how did you deal with the break? Did you take a break?
The break?
Yeah.
Yeah, I actually took advantage of the control of my breaks. I took like three or four breaks.
Oh.
Yeah, because now you can control your breaks, right? You get your 40 minutes, however long it is. I just completely forgot. And so I took like a 5-minute break, 10-minute break, and then another 5-minute break, just semi randomly. But once again, make sure that when you're about to take that break, that you have answered and went back and checked to make sure that you're not leaving any unanswered questions that you've already seen. Otherwise, you will not be able to come back and answer those.
Yeah, don't leave anything unanswered. That's just waste. Okay, anything else?
Anybody else? You can type them in.
Okay.
Maybe some people are on the phone and may not have the ease of typing.
Yeah, if they want to.
Yeah, raise your hand and we will unmute you.
Yeah, I mean, if you want to also share your experience, that's fine too. We learn from each other a lot. I really prioritize this. That's why I do live sessions more than recorded ones, because people learn from each other a lot. And when we speak out, we are creating a memory about that information, that it sticks better in our brain. And I feel like just don't be shy and ask your questions, because we all kind of understand each other way better than anybody else, all of our other friends or family. So there's no need to be shy.
And once again,
we all failed, so there's no shame in there too. Okay.
I didn't do it before. Once again, I want to promote the arequestions.com. I found it through a friend who recommended it, and the free resources and free questions are great. So if you're unsure whether or not it's worth it, I personally think it's way worth it.
There's a bundle, by the way, if you are testing for all three, that I can maybe share, but I don't know. Move this window from, do you guys see? No, I don't. Yep.
If you're on the fence about it, just go to the website, look at the let's look at the free questions.
Yeah, there's a bundle deal that I feel people are missing. So now I put it at the top with a huge band and I highlight it. I'm doing my best to make people see it because they come and ask me, they're like, do you have a bundle deal? And I'm like, it is there actually, but I feel like it's hard, I guess, for people to see sometimes when you go on a website. So it becomes a little bit cheaper. That's the whole point.
And
yeah.
Again, completely.
And it's only one-time pay, guys. I'm not doing subscription. And I only give access 6 months at a time. Why? Because some people pass their exams and they share their access with their friends. And so to prevent that, I put that 6-month thing. But in that 6 months, if you are still testing and you send me your NCARB screen that's showing that you're testing and just say, can you please give me access for another 6 months, I will just do it until you pass all of your exams. So not forever, but until you finish your testing. So
I think, you know, and I understand the challenge that is to find good resources, but I think when we find a good resource and somebody who's trying to help us out, and I don't think it's I don't think it's, you know, priced expensively. I think we should support those who are trying to help us out. So, you know, take those things into consideration. This is something that Elif started for, in my opinion, all the right reasons, and this is just a way to kind of cover some of her time. And again, we support each other with encouragement, but also it also helps to help each other.
That's why I was telling you before we start, that's where I base the price, and I'm like, don't make it too expensive, don't make it. So I think keeping it cheaper, keeping it one-time payment, you kind of try to tell the others that, you know what, guys, I'm not just after the money. I really want to help because you have to help me out too, because this is time and effort, and like the website, running the website itself has this monthly maintenance costs and all that. So we have to cover for all that, but we still have to help each other. So let's not to be too greedy, right? I think the other guys are doing very similar. Like Designer Hacks is very cheap. VR is very cheap. And I feel like they are very cheap for a reason. They all have the same intention. And I have spoken to all of them, and I can attest that they are all very like good people, just want to help, but also that's a business now, so they have to cover for their efforts. So I feel like a lot of people in this business, in my business basically now, is also like there to help too. So I can tell you from the point that I actually have spoken to them like face to face, on call, texted, and I can attest like most of them are genuinely good people trying to help. It's not all about money. So
and to add to this idea that there are resources out there, you know, AIA Florida, we're also trying to continue to have virtual sessions where you join in and we go through some questions. So be on the lookout for those as well. I believe I've seen a few names here that was there a few days ago, and the idea is to use it as a starting point, as a resource, as a cadence for your continuing education to make sure that you pass this test. So make sure you stay in the loop of information. So that
I would definitely do that. That sounds priceless. That sounds really helpful. You learn a lot from that out loud discussion, because when you are reading, it's quiet, right? You are all by yourself in your room reading. You're not like reading out loud. Most people don't read out loud, but when you are speaking content out loud, it makes a lot of difference. I wouldn't miss that. And also the support, the community, that knowing that you are not alone, you are not doing this on your own, is very helpful too. Like I was telling that it is a little like challenging and sometimes traumatizing process. So why go through that alone, right? Just hold each other's hands and like try to get support from the community. Why not? I would definitely do that.
We have a question here from Jose.
Yes. I am trying to read, but Can you read it? I can't see it.
Yeah, it says, I enjoy the conversation regarding the important words. Do you have more tips or a list of those important words?
I mean, I don't have a list of something like that, but it is maybe, I mean, it's a little harder to explain this way without having an example, but I wish I brought an NCARB question, maybe like from the handbook to explain it. But I can't think of a sample question right now off the top of my head to give you example. But basically what that tip is just was very helpful, kind of that became like that, and keeping your time during the exam, like really tracking your time during the exam would be my like 2 top suggestions or tips for the test.
Yeah, if I can add a little bit to that as well, is on the important words, it really has to do with the contextual question itself, right? So if the question says, you know, the owner is requesting to do X, Y, Z, and then it mentions something about the neighbors and, you know, something else about that seems unrelated to what the owner is requesting, then you know that those questions aren't, or sort of that extra information is not needed, right? So it's a contextual thing, and then of course you can pick particular words within that sentence. We also have.
For example, I just opened this PPD, the first sample question on PPD. So I'm gonna try to explain. If you guys go to handbook quickly, maybe just Google the 5.0 handbook and go to PPD sample item 1 question. It says a preliminary drainage analysis for a small land parcel in a cold, wet location indicates slope of 1% or less. So cold, wet, not too much slope, right? It's almost flat. The land parcel is intended to be developed into a suburban shopping center. Okay, shopping center, so I'm gonna have cars, right? People are coming, they're gonna park. Which type of stormwater management system should the architect recommend? Check the 3 that apply. So just that, I'm just gonna look at the options now. So it says check the 3, yes. So the first one says an underground cistern fed from rainwater collection on the shopping center roof. The second one, don't think anything, okay? Just read the options. Porous asphalt in the parking lot. Okay, the third one, a constructed stormwater wetland planted with native vegetation. And
are you able to share the screen so people are able to follow?
Unfortunately, this is my my second computer is on my right, so I opened it, pulled up it right there. Because, okay, this is my Mac was my all ARE stuff is on my Mac, and this is my work laptop. We couldn't open the GoToMeeting on Mac, so I had to switch my Windows, which is my OMB laptop. So that's why I was much faster on this one.
I may be able to pull it up here for you.
If you can do that, I can stop sharing. If you, in the meantime, if you can pull it up, let me. How do I stop?
What page number is it?
It's page 76.
Out of 173?
Yes.
Okay.
So did you pull it up on the screen? How can I stop sharing? Okay, I paused.
Okay, I was like, there should be a stop feature.
Did I say pause or?
It should
show
under sharing. There should have a little square saying stop showing screen.
I can stop sharing. Got it.
Yes, and then if someone else has the page pulled up, you know, we could always change presenter as well.
Change presenter, so I'll make me the presenter really quick so I can show the screen so people can follow. Let's see here, I believe this one. Can people see the screen here?
Yeah, I see my website. If you go to handbook, yeah, this one. Okay, there you go. Thank you.
Is it this one then, right here?
I'm just going to use that one to see maybe at least one or two you can pick just this, okay? Because it says pick 3. If you can find one of them and just use your judgment with the other 2, or maybe the last one, because usually people tell me if it says pick 3, they are good with the 2. They cannot decide which one is the third one. I hear that a lot. So guys, if you read this question, right, it's a wet, cold, rainy place. It's flat. There's no slope. So you have to deal with this water on the hard surfaces, such as your surroundings, parking space, and your roof. And it's a shopping center, so it's gonna, you should imagine that it's gonna have a much larger roof than for example, than a house, right? So you have to deal with that, all that hard surfaces. So that's the idea. It tells you that it's wet, right? So that wet and it's not sloped. So there's going to be a ponding issue. So you'll have to deal with that. That's why it does tell you that it is wet and it is flat, is because it wants you to think that, how am I going to deal with this ponds of water because it's raining so much and it's flat. Okay, let's go from there. So the first option says an underground cistern fed from rainwater collection on the shopping center roof. So this one is dealing with the roof surface. Okay, keep a question mark. Okay, this one is trying to deal with one of the hard surfaces. Look at the second one. It says porous asphalt in the parking lot. Okay, this one is trying to deal with another hard surface. And so these two kind of trying to do a similar job. These two are trying to do the collect or divert that rainwater. One is trying to divert it into the ground, right? Because it's porous. It has pores in it. It means it has more holes in it that can just, like a strain, drain the water, right? And the other one is gonna absolutely collect it and send it to a system, an underground cistern. So look at the third one, foundation drainage around building perimeter. So I am trying to deal with the rain that is my existing building on daily basis, or I don't know, seasonal basis. It says cold and wet. Let's say daily basis. I'm dealing with that. So my foundation is already closed, and I was supposed to do it when I am building this building during the foundation phase of the construction. I should have thought about that water issue already, right? All the foundations, depending on their location, has some sort of water strategy, right? So this is not dealing with, like, do you see where I'm coming from? So the other two, the first two, are dealing with like above ground existing surface, flat and firm surface conditions. This one is already, I'm past that point. So this is like underground. My problem is that it's raining all the time and I don't have a slope. So foundation is not my problem at this point. So on-site gray water treatment. Yes, the rain is gray water. Yes, it needs to be treated, but the question is not telling me how you can repurpose this wet location water. If the question would tell me you have a specific building that is using so much water, okay, and it's a rainy site, you would be like, okay, I have to repurpose that rainwater. It's treated on site and reused in the building, right? But none of them are safe. So why would you be bothered with the treatment of that rainwater, right? You are trying to keep it away from your building in an environmental sense. You are trying to manage, control that stormwater. You are not trying to, the question does not tell you anything about the treatment of that stormwater. You never heard that. So I would definitely cross out that gray water treatment if I was in the exam and I did not know much about that, because the question has nothing about treatment. The question has nothing about reuse of that rainwater, nothing. So just cross it out. That one is the easy one to cross out. So look at the last one, diversion ditches between adjacent rows of parking spaces. So again, parking. Do you see porous asphalt in the parking lot? Diversion ditches between parking spaces. So you see, two of them are dealing with the same issue. And the question tells me pick 3. So if the two of them are trying to solve the same issue at the same spot with 2 different methods, go for them. And the third one, if you are confused between the foundation and then the cistern, from the roof, this is where you have to like a little like guesstimate based on your architectural background. Obviously, you are architect. You are not like going in this exam blindly, right? So you have an education background, even though you did not study this exam or this question specifically. So you know that a parking surface and a roof surface are more flat and open to rain, right? So they are more relevant to each other than the foundation, which is underground already covered and has a different, it has different methods to treat the water. You have to create the drainage, give it to the main storm system, but it is like kind of stands out between all those four. The other two, because the parking we picked that. So roof kind of makes more sense to be grouped with the parking because they are both hard surfaces. So this was a harder one, but there are much more obvious ones in the exam. So there are a lot of like, this is code. I'm trying to see if there's another example I can find to
While
give.
you look for that, I wanted to share something that Erica has posted here. Is that she found Hyperfine has created assignments and a weekly study guide that follows similar to what you said, creating your own questions. So they're fairly inexpensive. She hasn't tried them quite yet, but it seems to be a good way to go forward. So if it helps practice. It's Hyperfine. They created,
oh, I know Hyperfine.
She's saying that they created assignments and a weekly study guide to follow.
Yes, I followed that. I studied Hyperfine. I used it, yeah. I suggest that it's really good. Guys, I also purchased, I did not mention, I purchased black spectacles for a month. I was trying to remember the name. I think I kind of, the questions were, I think there's no bad practice questions. You have to keep practicing. So I use the practice questions. And I did not learn from the videos. Then I also signed up for Ember for 2 months. Again, I could not learn from videos. Then I noticed I'm also not able to learn from YouTube videos too. So it is a personal thing. I don't think, I think I cannot learn from watching something because I watched a lot of TV growing up. I kind of like ruined that for myself. So, but I hear great things about those, not the black spectacles, but from Ember Book. I hear a lot of people benefit from that a lot. If you are more that kind of learner, just give it a shot for a month. And then if you feel like that's good, keep doing it. But those are the resources that I did not mention. I noticed that sometimes people ask me if I suggest like buying them. I guess I don't suggest black spectacles, but I would suggest. Oh, A had a practice questions. What is it? Arch exam prep. That one I like. ArchiPrep. I like their questions too, but I guess it's a little expensive because you have to also become a member. On top of that, you have to pay monthly. Yeah.
We also have this resource, and AIA also has a resource as well within their system. It's based on the national resource, so something you have to go through the AIA.org website, and they have some resources there as well. You don't have the app.
I would look at ArchiPrep questions. I remember I liked them. I don't have access to them now, so I don't remember the details, but I remember they were good.
Yeah, again, we're just throwing a bunch of resources at everyone, you know, just shotgunning it out. Pick something and see what works for you. The most important thing.
Exactly. I am giving you guys my absolutely honest opinion with all of them. I have no affiliation with anyone. I am intentionally keeping my no affiliation policy. Most of the other third-party materials have affiliations with each other, which is totally fine. I'm not judging anyone, don't get me wrong, but I am doing a lot of live meetings and I really wanted to keep being honest, and I don't want to suggest any other material out there because they are paying me to do so, you know? So these are my entirely honest opinion that I used and I found helpful, and I'm now telling others to do so. So, but again, maybe it's gonna work for you, maybe it's not. Just keep trying.
Exactly. Make that sketch, take that test, see See what it is, because we can talk here all day, but unless you go and take it for yourself, you'll never really find out what it
Never
is.
know, yeah.
And then you'll determine if it has worked enough for you, what you've been doing, and if not, then change it up. Again, similar to Elif, I passed the first few quite easily, and then I got a little too confident, and then life slapped me in the head with a fail. It was really hard for me to take personally, just because I never failed at a test before that one, and I needed to mentally prepare for that eventuality when I heard everyone doing it, but it was still hard to accept it. Emotionally, it was a bit hard to get over, but you just got to keep going. And then if that wasn't working for me, then I just changed my study cadence, and I said, okay, I got to study a little bit more. I got to study different material, and just kept going for it. So it's very important to jump in and take that test.
I agree everything you said, yeah. Okay, anything else, guys? Or should we wrap it up?
Early here, so yeah. If anybody has any more questions, as Elif was about to say, please type them in there. If not, I think we can finish early and you continue with hopefully a nice Saturday wherever you may be living.
I hope the weather is nice over there. It's kind of became super nice recently in New York. It was so cold 2 weeks ago. Now it's much, much better.
Glad to hear. It looks like we don't have any questions, and want to thank everyone who took some time out of the Saturday once again. And we hope to do some other virtual presentations relatively soon. Thank you, Leah, once again.
Welcome, guys. See you. Good luck. Bye-bye.
Thank you, guys.